My introduction's always the worst part. A few years back, when I first came up with the idea for Break Brad, the concept behind it wasn't about reviewing things, it wasn't about in-depth breakdowns of stuff. All it was for me to sit down and complain about the little things in life that annoy me, things that are basically pretty inconsequential. They don't really have a massive negative impact on my life, but they just get to you. And I thought, if I sit down with a camera and I project that stuff out into the world, I can make a funny video out of it, because, people get to watch me whine about something that doesn't matter. And for me, it's like a form of therapy, because I can put it out there into the world, I can get rid of it, I can release it, and then I can move forwards and be freer. I am in desperate need of that therapy right now, because there is something that has now been annoying me for almost a year. I'm recording this in June 2024. And this thing happened to me in July 2023. And it's been annoying me so much that we're almost a year later and I haven't quite been able to get over it. So in my mind, I'm like, you know what? It's the perfect opportunity for me to make an old-fashioned Break Brad video, one where I complain about this thing and I feel better, hopefully. Or I'll just feel angrier. I'll just get more and more pissed off as the video goes on, and then I'll end up in a worse situation at the end. I guess we can do a little, we can find out, can't we? We can all find out together. Bad. You might be wondering, what could have annoyed me so much that I would still be annoyed about it a year later, enough to make a video? And that thing is a jigsaw. That's not like slang for anything in particular. It literally, where are you? Here you are, you prick. This jigsaw right here in my hand has been the subject of frustration for me for a long period of time. By the end of this video, I want you all to be just as annoyed as I am, because this jigsaw right here deserves all of the hatred, all of the vitriol that we can give it. But in order for you to be as annoyed as I am, I need to take you back. I need to rewind time back to when I got this, and I need to prime you for how I felt and how things progressed to get to the point we are now, where I need to record it. So if you're looking at the runtime of this video, you're noticing that I'm talking about a jigsaw, and yet the runtime for this is probably over an hour long. I don't know, because I'm recording this, I don't know how long it's going to take, but it's probably over an hour long. And you might be thinking, well, surely you can explain why this thing annoys you in a YouTube short in a minute. And the answer to that is, yeah, I probably could. But if I was to do that in 1 minute, then obviously I wouldn't be able to fully vent the frustrations, get over to you exactly why this thing should go and die in a fire. But also, you wouldn't get to come on this magnificent journey with me and waste potentially an hour or two of your life. So everybody, I hope you're relaxed, hope you're ready. Maybe grab yourself a drink. I am drinking today some Dead Man's Fingers with a little bit of Pepsi Max, hashtag not sponsored. Although if you want to sponsor me, I know that this video is going to get like 100 views, but either Pepsi or Dead Man's Fingers, if you want to sponsor somebody who's not going to get you anything in return, then do that, because it will be a lot easier for me to not have to buy your products. What a great sponsorship opportunity. Anyway, I hope everybody is sitting comfortably, because we're about to go on this nice, fun ride together. Cue the title card or whatever I'm doing with this one. Let me rewind time backwards to the summer of 2023. I was in, admittedly, a little bit of a rough patch, mainly because I was having a lot of trouble disconnecting from work. So I know a lot of people have this problem, and it's a problem that I've had for a very long time, is that when you work for yourself, I spent the last few years working from home, doing freelance editing. When you work for yourself, when you work from home, when you make your own schedule, it's often very difficult to separate yourself from your work, because you have a home environment and a work environment, but they're exactly the same. The room I'm in now, believe it or not, this isn't a real brick wall, it's actually a fabric backdrop. The room I'm actually in now is my bedroom / office room, because my bed is there and my computer is there. So this ability to sort of separate parts of your life becomes very difficult when you're in that situation. Now, don't get me wrong, throughout this period, there were times when I was not working, but you always feel like you should be doing something. Now, that's the issue with this. It's that your free time doesn't feel like free time, because it feels like wasted time when there's other things you could be doing. That's what I'm trying to explain. I never felt like I had actual free time. And it caused problems with people in my life because I would be thinking about work when I'm not at work, or checking things on my phone when I shouldn't be checking things. And they'd be like, no, Brad, you stop it. Enjoy your holiday in Lanzarote. Adam, if you're watching this, obviously I'm referring to you here. So I was looking for a way to disconnect, basically switch off from all of the stuff that I felt like I should be doing and have some time that was purely just leisure time. And it was during this period I was perusing the charity shops in my local area. And during this perusal, I don't know why I want to use the word peruse so much, I found this little thing right here. This is obviously a jigsaw, as I've mentioned, but it's not just any jigsaw, it's a special kind of jigsaw. I'll get more onto what this jigsaw is in the next chapter, but for now, I'm getting you into my state of mind. I saw this jigsaw, and when I was a kid, I used to love jigsaws. I was actually a really big fan of them because my gran is a big fan of jigsaws. Hi, Gran, if you're watching this, you get a shout out as well. All the people who don't get shout outs are all going to feel really jealous of the people that do. So, fuck you, everyone else. No, I was a big fan of jigsaws. I even had one of those big folding things that you build the jigsaw on and then you can store it. I wanted to get back to that feeling of just sitting down with something tactile and not really thinking about anything else, because jigsaws are one of those things where you really can just like disappear, because all you do is sit down with a table and with a bunch of bits and you're staring at them so much and concentrating and looking for things that you're just not there. And this is what I wanted. And in particular, this one, obviously I'm going to get to it in a second. I'm really teasing you here. It's like a proper little, come on, good stuff's coming. I bought the jigsaw. This thing, I believe, cost me £3. I don't know how much it would have been brand new. Does it have a price on it? Whatever it was, brand new, whatever price it was too fucking much. But I bought this and I was ready for some good jigsaw times. But oh, how wrong I was. I should have left this in the shop and then burnt that shop to the ground so no one else could ever buy it. So what is a jigsaw? Well, you take a big image and you cut it up into... I'm not explaining a real jigsaw. What is this jigsaw? Why is this jigsaw different to other jigsaws? Well, as you can see from the box, this is a Poirot mystery jigsaw puzzle game. So with your standard jigsaw, you get a picture on the box and you make the jigsaw that is that picture. But with a mystery jigsaw, you don't get the picture. The picture is unknown to you. You get some sort of hint or clues or something like that, and you have to build the image without the reference. And I did one of these when I was a kid. This isn't the first mystery jigsaw I've done, but the one that I did when I was a kid, what it was the image on the box was a broken window, like a shop window, and there were loads of people on the outside looking in and reacting to something. And you had to build what they were looking at. So like one person was being sick, and one person was like shocked, and one person was pointing and laughing. And you build the inside of the room to figure out what happened and why these people are reacting the way they were. And I really enjoyed that jigsaw. Obviously, it's quite difficult to build a jigsaw without the picture, but the way this one was designed was perfect for this, because there were loads of different individual features in the room that allowed you to sort of piece those together. And there were lots of different colours, there was a variety of different things going on. As you were building it, you could decide where pieces would go based on other pieces and build the image. It was great, well made, no complaints about that at all. This mystery jigsaw works a little bit differently. So this one, obviously, as the box suggests, is based on a mystery written by Agatha Christie, legendary crime novelist. And this case is obviously called The King of Clubs, as it says at the bottom. And the way that this one works is that inside the box, there is a booklet. And this booklet is a condensed down version of a story written by Agatha Christie. You read through this story, and when you hit a certain point in the story, the booklet will say, now build the jigsaw. And you create this jigsaw. Once it's finished, you use the jigsaw to then solve the case. You solve the mystery using clues given to you in the image on the jigsaw. And then you go back to the booklet, and at the end, there is a bit here, I don't know how easy it's going to be to see, that's mirrored. So you can't just read it easily. And you hold this in front of a mirror, you read it, that's the solution, and you're like, oh, did I solve it or did I not? And that was the basis of this jigsaw. And you know what? Sounded fucking awesome. When I was a kid, obviously I loved jigsaws, but I also loved CSI. Big CSI fan, big murder mystery fan generally. I love being able to solve those kind of puzzles. And so being given a murder mystery jigsaw at this period in my life when I'm looking for something to take me away from being buried by the need to do work all the time, it seemed like the perfect thing for me. So through this video, I'm taking you on the process that I went through with the jigsaw. So the next step is I need to tell you what the story is about, because that's the information that I had going into the process of building the jigsaw. I read the little booklet and I learned things about what was supposed to be happening. So this jigsaw, as I said, is based on an Agatha Christie story called The King of Clubs. King of Clubs, written on box. And The King of Clubs was a story that Agatha Christie wrote in, I think it was 1932, and it was originally published in an English magazine called The Strand. Ah, it was 1923, and it was the sketch. I've got everything wrong. I've got my notes right there, and I was like, oh, I can do this without my notes. No, it was published in 1923 in a British journal called The Sketch. Just half misremembering every little bit of details, but it's fine. The original short story was obviously a lot longer than this. They've condensed the story in this booklet down to 6 pages. There are 5 pages, which are the pre-story, and then 1 page, which is the solution. So let me run through the story of the King of Clubs, and I'm going to preface this by saying the story I'm about to explain to you is not the original story written by Agatha Christie. The story I'm about to go through with you is the version as presented in this jigsaw. So I just want Agatha Christie fans out there to know that I am not besmirching the good name of the fantastic author by picking on the story itself, because what's in here isn't the real story. However, it does contain elements of the real story, so spoilers for The King of Clubs, I guess. What's that smell? There's like a smell like the sea coming in through my window in Sheffield. You know, let's pretend I'm reading it from the booklet, because then it looks a little bit more like it's an actual story. Our story begins in a South London suburb on a beautiful spring night. The 4 members of the Oglander family, great name, are sitting down together for an evening in. The father is Henry Oglander, the mother is Margaret Oglander, the son is John Oglander, and the daughter is Stephanie Oglander. I'm not going to remember those names. I barely remembered it for that bit I just did. So I'm going to be referring to them all the way through this by their role in the family, because that's just easier to remember. So you got father, mother, son, daughter. We're introduced to the family as they are in the middle of a game of bridge, which is something they do every single Thursday night. And while this is happening, there's a knock on the door. So the father gets up, and when he answers the door, a woman collapses into his arms, and she says the word, "Murder!" And then she faints. So we very dramatic opening for the story. The woman in question is a famous dancer called Valerie Sinclair, who the story tells us came out of nowhere and took the world by storm. One of the people instrumental in Valerie's rise to fame was a man named Henry Reedburn, who is described as a nightclub owner, and as luck would have it, I don't know whether there's luck, but as the story would have it, his house is very nearby. So when the police arrive, it makes sense to go and investigate Reedburn's house, because he has a connection with the person who just said murder and fainted. And when they get there, they find him dead. Oh no, it's almost like it's a mystery, a murder mystery. They find him dead. He has a wound on the front of his head and a wound on the back of his head. We're then taken to the next morning, where Hercule Poirot, the amazing detective, and his friend Captain Hastings are visited by the Prince of Morania. The prince wants to marry Valerie, and he is worried that she murdered someone. So he wants Poirot to basically absolve her of the crime, declare her innocent, so that people, like, her reputation isn't ruined, and he can go on and marry her, and it's fine. During this conversation, the prince reveals to Poirot that Henry Reedburn, the victim, was in love with Valerie. He wanted to be with Valerie, but Valerie didn't like him. In fact, she was scared of him. The reason she's scared of him is because Valerie went and visited a psychic, and the psychic gave her a reading where basically she said, "Beware the King of Clubs, woo!" And Henry Reedburn was known by the moniker the King of Clubs because he owns clubs. So Poirot agrees to take the case in order to help rule out Valerie as a suspect for the prince. And Poirot and Hastings go to the Oglander house because the night before, when Valerie had turned up, the doctor who had visited her to make sure she was okay had said, "It's probably best for you not to leave. You should stay here overnight and then leave in the morning." So Valerie is still staying at their house. So naturally, Valerie's like, "Poirot, I didn't kill him, wasn't me." And Poirot's like, "No, no, no, mademoiselle. I believe that you did not kill him." Because that's how Poirot speaks. Poirot says that he's spoken to the doctor who examined the body, and that the wounds could only have been dealt by a strong man. I do feel like it's a bit presumptuous to rule out every woman in the world. I understand you might be like, okay, someone who's strong may have dealt the wounds and is maybe more likely to be a man, especially during whatever time period the story took place. But to be like, no woman ever could have done it. The blow has been, it is too strong. Or the only person who could have done it is a muscular man. Like, Valerie's a dancer, right? She's a dancer, so she's fit, she's athletic. She could whack somebody pretty hard. What if she did it with a baseball bat? Because, you know, you get the extra swing and you easily could have done it. I don't know why she's got a baseball bat. It's my version of the story now. She's allowed a bat. Valerie explains that the reason she went to visit Reedburn is because Reedburn had told her that he had a dark secret of hers. He knew something about her and he wanted to blackmail her. So she turned up to try and persuade him not to do this, like to buy him off. But Reedburn had said, "No, I don't want money. I only want one thing from you." Have a guess what that might have been. Naturally, Valerie refuses, but the conversation doesn't get to go any further because the two of them hear this rustling sound coming from behind the curtains. And so Reedburn goes over and he pulls the curtains apart, and a bedraggled man, who the story refers to as a tramp, bursts out, beats Reedburn across the head, and then goes for Valerie. Valerie freaks out, or as you would, and basically tries to leave out of the nearest exit, which for her is the window behind where the curtains were drawn. And out of that window, the only house that's visible across the field, or at least the nearest house, is the Oglander house. So she sprints across the field, gets to the house, and that is where she was found when she collapsed and went, "Murder!" Without any extra information, this story seems quite plausible. There's no reason for her to lie, there's no reason for anybody involved in the story to lie, and as Poirot had said, only a man could have committed this murder. It's like it couldn't have been her. So Poirot and Hastings go downstairs and they find the Oglanders' living room untouched from the night before. So the bridge game that they were playing, the one they play every Thursday night, was set up on the table, half done, because obviously they were interrupted by this incident. Poirot and Hastings have a conversation in the living room while they look around at the various portraits on the wall. And then Poirot turns his attention to the bridge table and he interrupts, exclaiming that the King of Clubs, it is missing! And after spotting this, Poirot immediately solves the case. For now, this is where the story ends. There are some details in this story that I have skipped over, and that's because they're details that didn't jump out to me until I came back and reread this later on. But for now, we'll leave it as it is. That's an outline of the way the story went. And after you finish reading that section, at the bottom of the page, you get this message. Can you see what led Poirot to the murderer? Complete the jigsaw, then read the solution. So, implying here that the jigsaw that we are going to be completing is going to be the Oglander's room, presumably the bridge table where the King of Clubs is missing. It's going to be that room from the perspective of Poirot, and when we've made the jigsaw, we can then solve the case. So, on a lovely July morning, I have no work to do, no other commitments, and I think it is time to begin the jigsaw. So I sit down and I empty out all the pieces. Should I do it now? Like, recreate it? See, I've got to tidy this up now. Anyway, I decided I would start the jigsaw. So if you haven't noticed on the box already, and I don't think I mentioned it earlier, this is a 750 piece jigsaw. Obviously, it's not the biggest jigsaw you can get. There's jigsaws that are colossal. The standard size, I think, is usually 500 or 1,000, depending on how many pieces you want. So 750 is a lot. It's especially a lot when you don't have a picture, when you have to try and make the jigsaw just based on the little clues and hints that we got from the story. The first problem with this jigsaw is that there are large sections of the image that are the same colour. Now, this is bad in any jigsaw because jigsaws should be about pattern recognition. They shouldn't be about brute forcing 100 or so pieces into spaces until one of them fits. It's really dickish of the people who made this to give me a jigsaw where I don't have the picture and make big chunks of it the same colour. That's a dick move, you're a prick. With a lot of jigsaws, the best strategy is to start with the edge. If you can build the edge, get the full shape around, you can then build outwards from that. However, that doesn't work with this jigsaw because the majority of the edge pieces are single block colours and they work like gradients into other colours, and there's no real way of knowing where in the picture they go, what order they're supposed to go in. A bunch of them are all relatively the same shape, so it didn't work to try and start with the edge. So what I did instead was I decided I would start with features. Now, looking through the pieces, it's very clear that there are certain things in this jigsaw that stand out. One of which is the playing cards on the table, because there's a bridge table in the image, we've been told this, and the bridge table is laid out and the cards on that table are distinctive colours and shapes. So I began by making the table. Also on the table are some glasses. These are like goblets, like crystal goblets. And those as well are very distinctive and they're quite easy to piece together. The playing cards and the glasses were fairly easy to suss out. But the problem is that the table that these are sat on is a solid block green colour. And the only thing that differentiates the pieces on this table is the fact that there's some shadows cast across it. So you can sort of build up from the shadows, but all the shadows are also the same colour. So again, it took a lot of trial and error to just get the table done, because you've got this big section at the bottom and they're all either the same colour or same shades of colour, or some of them just have half shadow, half not shadow. It's like, well, what orientation is that? Where does that go? And I know I'm complaining about having to make a mystery jigsaw. The whole point is that it's meant to be a challenge because you don't know the picture and it's difficult. But could they not have maybe found a way to make it less block colours so that it wasn't just the entire experience is nope, 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 nope. Anyway, this isn't the main problem with this. I'm just venting now because during the actual process of doing the jigsaw, I wasn't hating it. It wasn't something that I was really annoyed about doing. Just in hindsight now when I look back, because of everything else that happened afterwards, it is tainted. The experience is tainted. Once the table was done, I hit another roadblock. And that roadblock was, sure, I've got the table. What the fuck is in the rest of the image? Because we weren't given any other information about this room except that there was a table with bridge and some family portraits. And there did seem to be some pictures or paintings in amongst the pieces, but I had no idea where they went relative to the table. I managed to build a little bit up of some stuff behind the table, and then I just sat down one day, took like an hour or two, I brute forced the entire bottom of the image. So I got the full table and that edge done. And once I had the bottom edge done, I then tried to get the rest of the edge done, because I had like half the edge already, and so there were less pieces for me to make mistakes on. And I did make mistakes. I made the edge, and I think there were 4 or 5 pieces towards the top corner that were in the wrong place. But it didn't really matter because the bits on the side were correct. And I was able to use them to then build out... Ooh, shit. That would have been awkward. You know what? I'm going to put this here, so if I knock this over, at least I'll damage the jigsaw and not my lovely blanket. As you will have gathered by now, it was a long and grueling process that took me the best part of 2 weeks. And I don't mean that I was doing this constantly, every day for 2 weeks. I tended to do this in hour or two spans. What I would do is I would sit down whenever I had like a little bit of time during the day, and I would set up my phone and I would put on YouTube videos. I believe I was watching Smoshcast, which is now called Smosh Mouth, but this was before that. I was watching episodes of that and they were there, and it was like my own little TV, and then I was making the jigsaw. So it was 1 or 2 hours a day, but this was for a long period of time. So I worked out maybe over 10 hours altogether, possibly more. But I got to the end of this period of time and it was done. The jigsaw was finished, and I was so happy about finishing it. I was so proud of myself for having done this that I recorded myself putting in the last piece. The final piece. Let's throw it around. The jigsaw is done, and now it is my turn to be Poirot. Poirot is a really awkward word to say. Nisha, if you're watching, you're aware of this. Nisha, friend of the channel, long-time colleague, for some reason, can't say Poirot. She always says Poirot. I think I've got the footage. I might put it in. I'm going to call you out in this video specifically.
Poir.
Yeah, Poir.
Row.
Row.
Poirot. 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 Poirot.
No, not Poirot. It is my turn to be... It is my turn to be Poirot. I am Hercule Poirot. And whilst building the jigsaw, I had already been theorising about what it could potentially mean, because I was building up parts of the image and I got to see some of what I would be using at the end to make my deductions. But now that it was finished, now that it was fully done, I was able to take a step back and analyse it completely. The completed image consists of a table with a partially played game of bridge, as you would expect from the story. The table has 4 glasses, 1 for each player, and an ashtray, a paperweight. There's something in the middle that looks like it's made of glass. You can see 2 of the presumably 4 chairs that the family was sitting at. One of these chairs has a cream-coloured fabric draped over the back. Behind this is a second set of chairs, and between them is a small table with a decanter and 2 partially drunk glasses. On the back wall behind all of this, there's a couple of photographs and paintings, along with various vases, flowers, and decorations. According to the little booklet that had the story in it, the clue to solve this case is in this image that you can see in front of you. The main thing that stood out to me immediately is that the King of Clubs card isn't missing. Poirot says in the story that the King of Clubs is missing, but it's not missing. It's very carefully placed on the table in a location that is visible to all. The King of Clubs card must be very important. It's the name of the story. The psychic mentioned it. It was Reedburn's nickname. And Poirot mentioned it just before he solved the case. However, it is a bit weird that Poirot didn't see it. It's very obvious where it is. The majority of the cards on the table as well are face down, so the fact that Poirot knew it was missing without looking is also a bit odd. My initial thought is that the psychic, the clairvoyant, who had given Valerie the prediction, must have been involved somehow in the murder, because magic isn't a thing in Poirot's world. As far as I know, magic isn't a real thing in the world of Poirot. He works on facts and logic, so somebody has predicted not only the murder victim based on the name that she put forward, but also that this card would somehow be relevant. And so I thought maybe somebody who knew about this prediction had hidden the card, like put the card on the table in a specific spot, knowing that Poirot was coming round so that he would see that card and make a connection somehow. I also thought maybe Valerie made up the story about the psychic. Maybe she made it up completely and the card was placed by her as a hint to maybe that somebody in this house was involved. I figured that there's no point in having this full room if only one detail is important, so I started to examine the rest of the image. And as I said, in the background there's that table with 2 partially drunk drinks and a decanter, and you can see on the image that the liquid that is in these 2 drinks is the same liquid that's in the decanter next to it, obviously, but it's not the same liquid that's in the glasses on the table. There's no reason to include this detail if it's not somehow important, so I started to theorise again. Maybe there were 2 other people in the room, the Oglander family and then someone else at the back drinking. Or could it be that Valerie had a drink when she got back afterwards and that somehow tied in? Maybe there was more to happening in this living room than we were initially told. Another element that caught my eye was the fabric that was draped over the chairs. The artist had intentionally put this fabric in that looked a bit like some kind of silk that was draped over the back of the chair on the left-hand side next to the bridge table. And this chair happened to be the closest to the King of Clubs card. So that got my theory brain thinking again. Maybe whoever placed the King of Clubs card here in this very obvious place is trying to tell Poirot or the police that the person who was sat in that chair was the murderer. And if we can find out who owned the silk fabric, maybe that's a clue as to who did the crime. The image also has 3 pictures or paintings on the wall, and I thought maybe they're also relevant. One of these is a picture of a bird, and I didn't think that one was going to be important. Maybe the type of bird could have been relevant, but I dismissed that one quite early on. There were two pictures on the wall that appeared to be of a couple in very fancy clothing. And your initial thought is going to be, maybe these are the Oglander parents, the mother and father. But when Poirot and Hastings are examining the pictures, Poirot specifically calls out the pictures for being really ugly. He says that the exact quote is, "Sentiment is more important to families than beauty," in that you're going to display your family pictures so that family are prominently shown in the house, even if those pictures aren't nice. So this already massively clashes with the story we're told. They seem really out of place when all we're told about these pictures is that they're ugly. And also, the only description we're given of the mother is that she has too much hair, and that doesn't seem to fit the woman in these pictures. The problem with all of this evidence that I've been looking at so far is that without any more information, it doesn't mean anything. Without knowing that these pictures are of the parents or the kids or one of the kids and the partner or whatever, without knowing that, they're useless. Without knowing whether there were more people in the room or whether certain people liked or didn't like certain drinks, that's useless. Without knowing who put the King of Clubs card there, it's useless. So I decided to go a step deeper, and I thought maybe the reason why I'm not getting the clues is because I don't know how bridge works. There is a game of bridge being played in the room, and I've never played bridge. So I looked up the rules of bridge. If anyone has never played bridge before, I don't blame you, I've never played bridge. But in bridge, you have 4 players, and they are in 2 teams of 2. And you begin by dividing the entire deck amongst all 4 people. After there's been a round of bidding, each player on the table plays a single card. And then at the end of that round, based on the rules that were established in the bidding phase, somebody can win the set of 4 cards that's called a trick. The number of tricks that you get determines your points. That's a brief summary of bridge. Learning these rules didn't really give me any information I didn't already have. The King of Clubs, specifically, is not an important card in bridge. There's some games where a specific card is important for that game. Like a game that I play with my gran, the King of Spades is an important card because it does different things than other cards in the deck. Whereas in this game, all the cards, I think they're worth different values and stuff, but all the cards are still equal to each other or their own types, if that makes sense. Obviously, by the nature of the way that bridge works, if there's a card missing, it would be obvious, because you divide the entire deck between 4 players, and then you all put 1 card in each. So they'll get to a point where there's 3 cards in and somebody doesn't have one. So I can understand if the card wasn't there, that might be important. However, the card is there. Not only is it there, but it's extremely clear where it is. It's on the table in the middle of all of the cards that are being played, sticking out of the box. It doesn't look like the card was forgotten. It looks like somebody's taken the card from the table and placed it. And because we have the context from the psychic and from Reedburn's nickname to back up the fact that that card is important, it seems like it's been placed, as I said, very intentionally. Beyond that, nothing about the layout of the cards or the order of the cards or where they were in the table seemed relevant. The scorecard that you have in bridge was missing, but there's no reason why that couldn't have just been somewhere else on the table. So after all of this, I was still only left with one theory, and that was that somebody had known about either the psychic's prediction or Reedburn's nickname, and they had taken that King of Clubs card. I can't say King of Clubs now. I'm having a drink. God. Do you know this is the 3rd time I've recorded this video? I recorded one a while back, sort of soon after this happened, and I wasn't happy with how it came out. And I also tried to record this about 3 weeks ago again, but I didn't like the way I was doing it because I'd made too many notes. And I like being able to improvise these videos. But this is the 3rd time now I've recorded this. This jigsaw is taking over my life. But as I was saying, I had one theory that somebody must have known that the King of Clubs was important and they had taken it and placed it near that chair. And the fabric on the chair was somehow relevant. Like the cups at the back was somehow relevant. But I couldn't find the thread. Let's wait for the siren. Are they circling my flat? It's been the same volume. At this point in my investigation, I was getting very annoyed, and I started grasping at straws. So let's take a good look at this image. Let's take a really good look. Why is every chair in this room different? If you look at the 2 chairs at the back, one of them has a metal loop arm and spherical feet, but the other has wooden wheel arms and solid feet. And then there's the two chairs at the bridge table. One of them has a solid curved back, and the other has an open, straight back. Is this a fucking student house? Why is all the furniture in this house completely different? The only thing I could think is that the person who made the image made them all different to make the jigsaw easier, so that you have an easier time figuring out where pieces went. But if you were going to do that, why not make the two chairs at the back of the room different colours to each other and different colours to the shadowy areas in the rest of the fucking image? Then I started looking at the direction of the lighting in the picture, because there has to be something I'm missing. The shadow that's cast on the floor here is coming from a grid window, one of the windows that has like the slats in it. The table's lit up but doesn't have a grid. So does that mean there's a second window in this room that has a slightly different design? The shadows are being cast on the table from the same direction, but the shadows aren't perpendicular like you would expect from sunlight outside of a window. So does that mean that this room is being lit from a local light outside the room? Or multiple lights outside the room? To make this even more confusing, the shadows that are on the vase and the plants are cast in the opposite direction. So does that mean there's another window or light source on the other side of the room? But the light that's casting the shadows on the vase and the stuff at the back of the room isn't casting shadows on the table. So is this a spotlight that's being obscured partially from one side? If you look at the black chair with the chrome at the back, the shadows are being cast from left to right on the feet, but then from right to left on the wall behind. Maybe Poirot noticed this. Maybe Poirot noticed that the shadows in the room all point in different directions, and that the room isn't actually real, and that somebody drugged Poirot, and all of this is happening in his head. And maybe Poirot saw somebody with the drugs earlier in the story, and that gave away that this room isn't real. Maybe Poirot realised that he's actually in the Matrix, and none of this is real, and that he's actually the one because he dodges bullets, and then he ends up going on to make a trilogy that isn't quite as well received as the first one, and they do a remake down the line where Poirot comes back, and it's a resurrection, but it means nothing. It means nothing. I'm over-examining the picture because I can't find anything that's relevant, and I need a clue. I got to a point where I was like, maybe the box art is relevant. This picture here, why is the king distorted in like a wavy way when it's inside a glass sphere? Surely it would be bulged, like distorted by a sphere, not like this. Also, King of Clubs, why is the C not capitalised like it is in Agatha Christie's original story? And I'm pretty sure it is in the book. Yeah, it's capitalised on here as well. Why is it not capitalised on the front? Why would you do that? But also, if you look at the cards in the front here, the picture cards go Ace, Jack, Queen. Why would they not go Jack, Queen, Ace? Why is the Ace here? It makes no sense for the Ace to be before the Jack. I know the King's missing, but that doesn't matter. They could have had Jack, Queen, and a space and the Ace, and then you would have known. And also, if you look at the back of this jigsaw, there's a difficulty level, and it lists this one as difficult. Oh, you don't fucking say. But then underneath that is one called impossible. What the fuck is an impossible jigsaw? Does it just not have all the pieces? Does it exist in 4 dimensions? I know that I am driving this home. I know that I'm going on about this quite a lot. But as I said, I need you to get into the frame of mind that I was during this. I need you to understand where I was mentally when I was doing this jigsaw and the process I went through to get to the point I am in at this point in the story. Speaking of story, I decided I would go back to the booklet because maybe there's loads of clues in the jigsaw, but because I wasn't thorough enough when I read through the original story, I was missing those clues. As I said, the original story, written by Agatha Christie, was longer than this, and it was condensed down into 6 pages. 5 pages for the pre-story, as I'd said. That means that every single thing that was included in this has to be relevant, because they have very limited storytelling time. Towards the start of the story, when Poirot first meets the Prince of Morania, Poirot questions why the prince would want to marry somebody who is just a dancer. And the prince responds by saying, no, Valerie, she is of good breeding. And I've heard a rumour that she may be a descendant of the Grand Russian Duchess. So what can we take from that? Well, first of all, the prince is a classist dickhead. You can't just marry somebody because he's in love with her. She has to be good breeding. But also, the fact that that's included, the fact that that wasn't just left out, means it's obviously going to be important to the story. When Poirot is talking to Valerie, it's mentioned that she's wearing a dress that belongs to the sister in the house. but she is also still wearing her own polished high-heeled mules. A mule is apparently a type of shoe, which I didn't actually know. You can tell that I only wear trainers. When Poirot asks about these shoes, Valerie says, well, I still have an image to maintain. I thought it was very curious that the descriptive word polished was used for the shoes, implying that they're completely clean and upkept. And I went back to the introduction for the story, the first page, and it specifically says, the first line, it had been raining that afternoon. And it also mentions how the ground was slightly muddy underfoot. Including that information is also very important. The story is either telling me that Valerie didn't run across that field, or that she had her shoes cleaned, or that she cleaned her shoes. The thing is, I don't find it that far-fetched that somebody may have cleaned her shoes, because she's a famous celebrity, and she's just gone through a traumatic experience, and she's a guest in somebody's house. So it's not that out of the realm of possibility for somebody to have wiped her shoes down while she was asleep. The biggest clue of all, however, is that when Poirot and Hastings are looking around the portraits in the room, Poirot is making a comment about how important family is. And during this, Hastings looks at one of the pictures and he describes the people he can see on it. And the description is, there is a family consisting of a gentleman with whiskers, a lady with too much hair, a solid, thick-set boy, and 2 little girls tied up with a quantity of ribbons. The only 2 girls that appear in this entire story are Valerie and the psychic. And initially I was thinking maybe the psychic's the daughter of this family. Maybe she's also one of them, and then that would somehow mean that she is linked to, like, that she knew about Reedburn across the field and she made the prediction, she moved the card. But it seemed more likely that Valerie is the missing daughter, or the absent daughter, I guess, of the Oglander family, because her breeding has been called into question by the story. And when Poirot is talking to her, he mentions that she seems quite at home, and she's staying in the house's spare room, implying that the reason they've got a spare room is because somebody used to live in it. They say the dress that she's wearing belonged to the sister, but it fits her perfectly. So they're implying there that it's her dress. Like, it's her dress, it's her room, that's where she grew up. From the new information that I'd gained, I formulated what I consider to be a bit of a shaky theory. I hypothesised that Valerie Sinclair, this world-famous dancer, was in fact just a simple suburban girl from this Oglander family, and that Henry Reedburn, the nightclub owner, knew about this because obviously he'd helped her rise to success and he lived nearby, and that was what he was going to use to blackmail her. Valerie then went to her family and asked for help, and one of the men in the family, the father or the son, went along with her, and during whatever confrontation happened, Reedburn got beaten over the head. This wasn't good enough for me because I didn't know who the murderer was. I had an idea that it might have been one of 2 people, but considering there's only about 6 people in the story, that just feels like a cop-out to be like, yeah, it's a third of them. So, what's happening? That's like the 4th siren that's gone past the window. Maybe I should check the news. As I was saying, I didn't know which of the 2 men was the murderer, but then I remembered that it was specifically pointed out that Henry Reedburn had been hit twice. He had 2 wounds, one in the front of his head and one in the back. And so, because they said a woman couldn't have done it, I naturally thought maybe it was both of them. Maybe what they're trying to say is that her father and her brother both went with her to confront Reedburn, and they'd both whacked Reedburn once. So I had a theory, but it's just a best guess, which isn't very Poirot of me. And it still leaves loads of loose threads. Why is the King of Clubs card placed so prominently on the table? Who does the silk fabric belong to? Who drank from the 2 extra glasses at the back of the room? And then there's the story in the booklet. If the Oglander family was involved, why does the booklet make a point of describing their day, the day that this all happened, as quiet and normal, and talk about how they sat down to play a game of bridge? For my theory to be true, the booklet would have to be lying. And then there's the psychic. How did she make a prediction that came true? Was it a coincidence? And then there's Valerie's shoes. Why is it important that her shoes are clean? Poirot was certain. He was 100% certain I have solved this case, which means I must be missing something. I'd been mulling this over for a long time and I was getting very frustrated. I was getting really annoyed, and I realised that I was already late to meet some friends. And so I had to know. I had to read the solution. I had to find out what I was missing. And I was hoping that when I read the solution, it would take this frustration that I was having with not knowing, not like solving the mystery, and it would turn it into admiration for how cleverly a mystery had been obscured from me. I would see the pieces fall into place. I would see what had made Poirot so certain about who had done done the murder, and I would feel glad that I had done this experience. So I took the booklet and I held the solution up to a mirror and I read it. The solution to a Poirot mystery jigsaw puzzle game contains 4 paragraphs. The first paragraph talks about Valerie Sinclair's shoes. Poirot explains that Valerie could not have run across the open field because her shoes were clean. I also did think this, but then couldn't someone have just cleaned her shoes? Poirot dismisses the idea that somebody could have cleaned the shoes because the living room downstairs was still untidy and a guest's clothing wouldn't have been a priority for the Oglander family. While I sort of get this reasoning, it also doesn't make sense because Valerie Sinclair is a recognisable, world-famous celebrity. She has turned up at their house in distress, having just presumably, or at least we find out later, witnessed a murder. I don't think it's too far out of the realms of possibility for the family, this nice, happy suburban family, to be like, we're going to look after her and make sure that she enjoys her stay and comfort her the best we can. Like, they offered her a dress. She is wearing a different dress. So where's her dress? Is it just lying on the side? Or did they take it away and wash it for her? So why is it too far beyond Poirot's realms of mind understanding shit? Why is it too impossible for her to have gone to bed and left her shoes downstairs and for them to have just wiped her shoes? In particular as well, because if they were muddy shoes and she'd come into the house wearing muddy shoes, she would have tracked mud through the house. And she obviously was wearing them upstairs, which means she wanted to wear them indoors. So you'd wipe the mud off them. Maybe they didn't have any shoes in her size, so the only shoes she could have worn were her own, so they cleaned them. Like this is interesting evidence. It's an important thing to notice a potential discrepancy in the story. This is not ironclad evidence that she is lying about something. The next paragraph talks about how an even more significant clue that Poirot picked up on is the fact that the King of Clubs card is missing, and the family couldn't have been playing bridge for an hour, as they said they were, if one of the cards wasn't in the game. If the bridge game was impossible, then the family must be lying. However, the card isn't missing. It's not missing. Look at the picture. It's right there. It's so visible that if somebody was setting up this game to cover a fucking murder, they would have seen that there is a card in the middle of the table sticking out of the box, and it would have given away that the game was set up. Somebody would have spotted it, although maybe not, because fucking Poirot didn't spot it. It is missing! It's there! It's right there, Poirot. Use your fucking eyes. It was at this point I realised that, yes, the card had been placed intentionally. That King of Clubs card was put there on purpose to be visible. But it wasn't by the characters in the story, it was by the artist who drew the picture that I was using on the jigsaw. It's a good job that small details aren't important in a murder mystery. It's also a massive assumption to make that because one card isn't active in the game, that no game was played at all. That card could have fallen on the floor in the commotion and somebody picked it up and just put it back in the box instead of on the table. That's not too far out of the realms of possibility. And if you count the cards, the card that's missing, the person's hand that's missing a card, is the person who is closest to the box. I think it's bottom left, so it's between the two people that are next to the box, like above and below. It could have fallen off the table from their place and they picked it up and put it back. That's not impossible. For Poirot to look at that and go, this is solid evidence that the murder was committed by these people. It's like, no, it's not. It's not clear evidence at all. Also, I'm really sorry for my accent. I'm sorry for trying to do the accent, but it's really funny. I'm getting angry again, like secondhand anger from past Brad talking about this again. So I think I need a little bit of silliness to try and also alcohol, to try and push it down a little bit so I can actually make it through the rest of the video. So I apologize if you are Belgian and I am butchering that accent. I assume it's a Belgian accent because he's a Belgian detective, but it does sound French. So I don't know if he's a Belgian detective but has a French accent, or if do Belgians speak French? Why don't I know stuff about the world? Why didn't I research this? This would have been far more interesting, to research the language and language patterns and stuff of people in Europe, and not this fucking shit. I know that I'm being a little nitpicky here, because in detective stories they do often have to make educated guesses or assumptions based on evidence that maybe isn't ironclad, but is enough to spur them on. But that's usually what that evidence does. It gives the detective an idea that something is out of place, and then they investigate further. It's not concrete evidence that something had happened. For the story to tell me that the card is missing, and for the jigsaw to have it not missing, it's really misleading, and it caused this horrible conflict in my head of, is it meant to not be there, or is it meant to be there? In the next paragraph, Poirot talks about the portrait of the family with the two daughters, and he concludes that Valerie must be the missing daughter who hid her upbringing because she became famous and didn't want people to know that she was from a suburban family. Again, I figured this out. And again, it's a decent deduction. The family's missing a daughter, we don't know where Valerie comes from, and there appears to be some kind of secret thing going on between the family and Valerie. It's not a bad deduction to make, but again, it's not ironclad evidence. This isn't proof. It's not proof, it's an assumption based on little bits of information. It's the kind of thing that you would look into further. The final paragraph is Poirot summing up who he thinks did the murder. He says Valerie must have been being blackmailed by Reedburn, and in order to basically threaten him into stopping, she brought one of her family, the father or the son, with her, and things went awry, and one of them killed Reedburn. So it turns out I got everything right. I solved the mystery perfectly and came to the exact same conclusion as Poirot. Now, I did use a bit of meta-knowledge to come up with this, using the idea that I know that the story had to contain important information because it was so short. And I didn't really pick up on the relevance of the King of Clubs card as presented in the story, but I solved it. I figured it out. So I had a week of relaxing away from work and watching some shows while putting together a lovely tactile jigsaw, and at the end of it I succeeded and solved the case. And I guess that's the end. But what's that? You've just looked at the runtime of the video and realised that it's nowhere near over, but I solved the case. I solved it. How can I be annoyed when I did the jigsaw and I figured it out perfectly? I'm guessing that some of you may have figured out by this point the reason why I was so frustrated and so annoyed with this jigsaw after I'd found out what the solution was. If you haven't figured it out yet, the jigsaw, the main thrust of this activity, was completely, utterly fucking pointless. Every single clue that I used to figure out who committed the murder was in the booklet, not in the jigsaw. The King of Clubs card being missing, in the booklet. Valerie's shoes being clean, in the booklet. The family photograph with an extra family member, in the booklet. The fact that a man must have committed the crime, in the booklet. The story that you have to read before making the jigsaw has enough clues in it to solve the case without the fucking jigsaw. The jigsaw had zero clues. In fact, the jigsaw had negative clues. The jigsaw had less clues than useful because there were things in the jigsaw that were misleading. The King of Clubs card, the artist had placed it so visibly, so intentionally, that I spent the whole time assuming that the fact that it was there must be important to the story. The fact that somebody had put it so that it was pointing out, fucking looking at me, means that that card must have been important. But no, the artist just did it to fuck with me. And speaking of which, why were there two other glasses in the background that were partially drunk? Was it meant to show that the room was untidy? Was the whole point to be like, look, the room's not been cleaned, so why would they have cleaned her shoes? Newsflash, that information was in the fucking booklet. I need a second. It's like a year ago all over again. The fact that it's really warm in here also doesn't help me getting angry. I think it's also worth pointing out as well that Poirot didn't actually really solve the case. He did the same thing I did of being like, well, it must be one of these two people. In fact, I did more work than Poirot did because I used the fact there were two injuries to come to the conclusion that two people must have done it. Poirot was just happy with, it was one of these men did it. That's like having a lineup at a police station and going in and be like, well, it was one of them. One of them did it. Great, good job, you solved the fucking case. I had naturally thought that the jigsaw was supposed to help you narrow down which one of them had committed the murder. But no, that's not the case. What Poirot said in this is it was one of them, probably the son. Because the son was described, when they looked at the picture, as being thick-set. And the thing was, that is what I had thought at first. I had looked at that description of that son, seen it said thick-set, and thought, well, they've described him as being big and muscular, so maybe he committed this heinous damage that could not have been dealt by a woman. But no, Poirot was just like, it was one of them, probably him. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. That's not Poirot. Also, what was the point in the fortune teller? Why was that never really gone into? Because a correct prediction from a fortune teller is extremely important. Like if you were doing a murder investigation and there is a psychic who predicts every murder, they're a suspect. They are a suspect because general science and most people agree that psychics can't predict the future. That's why I was so fixated early on with the fortune teller being important to the story, because they made a correct prediction in a world where that shouldn't happen. But no, I guess Poirot just exists in a world where magic and predictions and future telling, ooh. If this had happened in a longer story, it felt like it could have worked quite well, where you have this psychic prediction towards the start that adds a bit of mysticism and muddies the water in the middle, and then when you get to the conclusion, it turns out to just be a coincidence to confuse the audience. And that, to me, felt like something that Agatha Christie might have done. But if you're trying to condense a full short story down into a 5 to 6 page booklet, maybe, get rid of the bit about the psychic, because it's not important to the story. It doesn't add anything. All it does is confuse Brad. The whole reason that the prince brings up the fortune teller is because it supposedly gives Valerie a reason to not trust Reedburn and to be afraid of him. But we could already have gained that from the story by the fact that she was there when he got murdered, and then later on she says that he was trying to blackmail her. Like, we didn't need the psychic. It was irrelevant. Get rid. Ow. No. Bad psychic. The thing I think that is the most infuriating about this situation, about this game, about this mess, is that it wouldn't have been that difficult to make the jigsaw relevant. It wouldn't have been hard. All you need to do is, okay, in the story, get rid of the bit where Poirot says that the King of Clubs card is missing. Get rid of it. He just say that he notices something. And also, don't mention the family portraits. And then when you're doing the design for the jigsaw for the picture, you have it so that the King of Clubs card is maybe off on a side table. Because you've got loads of space in this picture that you don't need to fill with random shit like empty glasses. You can put the King of Clubs card off to the side, but make it really obvious that it's there, but not with the rest of the cards. So that as a spectator looking at this picture, you can go, they've included that over there for a reason. Why is the king not with the table? And you might be able to formulate that conclusion. And also, the pictures in the background of the jigsaw, make them the photos that were talked about in the story. How there were two portraits, one of 4 members of the family who were older, and then one of 5 members of the family who are younger. And then you could look at that as a person trying to solve the mystery and say, well, what's this? One of the pictures has 5 family members and one has 4. Why does one have more? Oh, there's a little girl there, the extra little girl there, she might be important. And then you can use that to solve the mystery. It's so annoying. It's not that difficult. It isn't that hard to turn this into a jigsaw that would have worked properly just by making those slight changes. Oh, and also, while I'm talking about changes they could have made, maybe, if you're doing a mystery jigsaw, maybe don't make a lot like the big patches of colour all the same. Maybe make it so the picture has different areas of different colour and maybe more patterns so that it will be easier for somebody to put them together without having to just brute force every piece. That's a personal nitpick. Other people might think that's fine. Like maybe they think that, oh, if you don't have the picture like just trying pieces until they work is fine. It's part of doing a jigsaw. Like people might even think that about normal jigsaws. Even if you've got the picture, there's some jigsaws that have like multiple patches of the same thing. That's how you increase the difficulty of a jigsaw. So you know what? Maybe that's just my gripe. But it's a gripe that has been exacerbated by everything else being just as annoying. So, there we have it. That is why I have been annoyed about this jigsaw for the past year or so. The fact that I spent ages making a jigsaw to solve a mystery, only to find out that the mystery didn't require the jigsaw. The jigsaw was a waste of time. And there's nothing more frustrating than me spending ages thinking it's important because I've been told it is, and because the format requires it to be, and then to come to the conclusion that it's completely irrelevant. So yeah, that's it. That's why I've been so pissed off, and I've vented now. I've vented to the camera, like I said, my therapy, and I do feel lighter. I do feel freer almost. What's that? The video's not over? There's more? In the days, months, weeks after having done this jigsaw, there's one thing that stuck with me, that really, really ingrained itself in my head. And that is that this jigsaw, this story that I participated in, is supposed to have been written by one of the greatest mystery and crime authors of all time, Agatha Christie. But the mystery inside it and how that mystery was solved is shit. I found it very hard to believe that what was contained within this box is indicative of one of the greatest writers in all of history. Like, this woman created Poirot and Miss Marple, along with other mysteries and other stories. Her work is consistently at the top of lists of the best mystery stories ever. And her estate has literally trademarked the moniker Queen of Crime. In the Guinness Book of World Records, Agatha Christie has the honour of being the best-selling fiction writer of all time, the most translated author of all time. And it's said that her works have only been outsold by William Shakespeare and the Bible. This huge dissonance between the author and this piece of shit led me to go back and track down the original 1923 story of the King of Clubs and to read that to see if what I was reading here was really the result of Agatha Christie or the result of some schlocky game maker who had condensed down the story so badly that they had ruined it. Guess which one it was? As expected, the original King of Clubs story contains the same characters, the same general story beats, the same sort of conclusion as the one that is in here. But there are quite a lot of incredibly important pieces of information that whoever wrote this decided to just omit, decided to just leave out. So to finish this video off, what I'm going to do is I am now going to go through the original King of Clubs story that Agatha Christie created, and in order to cleanse, to bleach everybody's mouths of the mess that we have had to deal with here, together we are going to include clips of the David Suchet portrayal of Poirot in Agatha Christie's Poirot, the series, because he is considered to be the seminal representation of this character, and they did an episode which the story was changed a little bit, but generally follows the same story as the one that is included here. So I am including clips of the legendary true portrayal of Poirot in order for us to all have a little bit of a reprieve from this. But before we begin, I'm going to close my window because there appear to be people outside making noise, playing, enjoying themselves. And it's not that I don't want them to be in my video, I don't want them to hear me crying about a jigsaw, so I'm going to close the window. The only problem with closing the window is it's now going to get fucking boiling in here and I'm already really hot. But thankfully, I'm getting towards the end of this and I'm going to be able to open the window back up. Maybe I could put my aircon unit on. I've got an aircon unit from last year from when I was still working from home. It's going to be so nice in here. I'm going to look forward to that. I'm going to look forward to the room temperature being brought down. It's going to be great. Anyway. In Agatha Christie's original version, the story doesn't open in the Reedburn house. The story opens with Poirot and Hastings in what I presume is their office, going over the news headlines from the previous day. While going over the news headlines, Captain Hastings reads out part of a story from the previous night, where Henry Reedburn had been found dead and Valerie Sinclair, the famous dancer, had turned up at the Oglanders' house. So we've already encountered the first problem with this booklet. For some reason, the booklet decided to take the story away from Poirot and Hastings at the start and take it to the house of the Oglanders, which is really, really deceptive. Because what you're doing in that situation is you're putting the narrator, like the overarching narrator, what's the term for the person who's like observing the story from the outside? What's the term for it? It's not narrator, because the narrator, it's like the third person observer or something, I don't know. But the perspective of the story is being placed in their house. And so it's really deceptive for the story to then be saying they had an uneventful day. They had a normal day where they went about their business like nothing happened. There is one sentence in here that sort of says that the version of the story that we're reading is being told to the police from the perspective of the father. That line is, "Tonight was different. They had been playing for about an hour bridge. They'd been playing bridge for about an hour, as Harry later explained to the police." That's the only mention, and it occurs in one part. It doesn't have anything to do with the previous part, where it specifically says, "The evening had started out quiet and normal, and the four of them had settled down for dinner and a few rubbers of bridge." It's so deceptive. After Hastings mentions this to Poirot, Poirot says, "I'm already aware of the case, because the Prince of Morania has already contacted me, and he is coming in this morning to talk to me about this case." And the prince in the story, the original story, he isn't a prick. He isn't a classist dickhead. He explains that he actually likes Valerie. He actually cares about her. And the line he uses is, "He is now living in more enlightened days, free from the old caste prejudice." So he actually does want to be with her. It's only after this when he also backs it up by saying, well, also, Valerie is clearly from good breeding, and there's rumours that she's actually aristocracy, so that's fine anyway. Poirot asks the prince if there's a chance that Valerie could be guilty, and the prince says, "I don't know. There's a reason why I think she may have attacked Reedburn, and the reason is that she went and visited a clairvoyant." The encounter that Valerie has with a psychic is almost the same in the booklet as it is in the original story. You know, you get the whole thing of, "You are in great danger, beware the king of clubs." But in the original story, it's not said that Henry Reedburn was called the king of clubs. That wasn't his known moniker. What is said is that Valerie interpreted the message to be about him. She made the connection between the warning she got and somebody that she knows in her life. And that is why the prince is worried. It's a very small difference, but it makes so much more sense. We're not being told that this is a real psychic prediction. What we're being told is that the prediction may have been misinterpreted by Valerie and may have led to her getting into some kind of confrontation with the man that she thought she was in danger from. In the booklet version of the story, Poirot and Hastings immediately go to the Oglander house to talk to Valerie. But in the original story, Poirot doesn't go there first. He goes to Reedburn's villa to investigate the crime scene. You know, like a detective would. The stuff that he finds at this crime scene is incredibly important, but I'm going to skip over it for now and come back to it later on when it becomes more relevant to the case. While at Reedburn's villa, Poirot also meets with a doctor who examined the body of Reedburn. And the doctor says, as he does in the booklet, that Reedburn has a wound on the front of his head and a wound on the back of his head. And Poirot says, could a woman have committed this crime? Could she have dealt these blows? And the doctor says, no, a woman couldn't have done this. I assume you're referring to Valerie Sinclair. So even though the doctor is making the same assessment that it couldn't have been done by a woman, he is doing this with the idea in mind that Poirot is looking at Valerie as a suspect. So the doctor is making his assessment based on knowing the specific woman that Poirot is asking about. Reedburn's body was found next to a marble chair that had these carved, like ornate, I think they were lions' heads on the arms. And Poirot says to the doctor, could it have been an accident? Could Reedburn have fallen over and smashed his head on one of these arms? And the doctor says, no. The position and angle of the body and the lack of blood wouldn't suggest that the wound could have been caused by this chair. Poirot follows this up by asking the doctor, could somebody have cleaned the blood up? And the doctor says, well, yeah, but if you cleaned away the blood, you would be hiding evidence of an accident to frame the situation as murder, which seems kind of unlikely given the information that we currently have. So the booklet version of the story has none of this in. It completely omits the entire crime scene investigation part of the story and just has Poirot immediately going to the Oglander's house to talk to the family. So that means that all of the information that Poirot gets in this booklet is through conversation and asking questions, not through actual investigation. This Poirot has no physical evidence of the actual crime. In the original short story, when Poirot and Hastings arrive at the Oglander's house, they're greeted first by a maid. And again, this is a very, very important piece of information that the booklet just decided to omit because there are people in the house whose job it was to clean the house. Before Poirot goes upstairs to talk to Valerie, he first encounters the daughter of the family. And whilst talking to her, she explains the game of bridge from the night before. So the game of bridge, in this booklet version, we get that from the perspective of the, whatever the word is for third person perspective viewer, or somebody in the comments tell me, what is the word for having a story where you're viewing it from an outside perspective? It's not first person story. I guess a third person spectator would be a good, I think I said something like that earlier, but maybe that. But anyway, in the booklet, that's how we are told the story of what happened. Whereas in the original story, the Agatha Christie version, we get this as a second-hand account from somebody else. So immediately, you're not being told it happened, you're being told that somebody has said it's happened, and that allows room for doubt. During this conversation, the daughter mentions that where she was sat at the table was the seat that was facing the window that looked out over to Reedburn's house. So obviously, if Valerie is running towards the house across this field, the daughter sat in that seat would have been the first person to see it. And the daughter also mentions that she was playing the bridge game on a team with her mother. And again, this is really important. If anybody knows how the game of bridge works, in your teams of two, so 4 people, 2 teams of 2, you sit opposite the person that you're on a team with. So Valerie's mother was facing away from the window. The daughter also apologises for the state of the house. She says that the servants have been so excited by the goings-on that they haven't had a chance to clean up from the previous night. I just can't believe how much was omitted. I understand they had to condense this down, but so far we have so much more information and we're barely even into the story. This is where, in the story, Poirot and Hastings go to speak to Valerie, who is upstairs. And Hastings makes an observation of Valerie that she seems so different to the daughter that they just encountered downstairs. But he makes a point of saying, it's not how she looks that's different. It's not like her facial features. It's her demeanour and the way she behaves. And it makes her and the daughter seem like completely different people, even though they do look alike. And I think this is a very, very clever way of telling the audience that there is a familial resemblance between the two people, but framing it in a way where it seems like he's actually making a commentary on the way that people's like station and class can affect the way they come across to people when they're in conversation. The explanation of what happened the previous night from Valerie is very much the same in the original story as it is in the booklet. Valerie says that she was talking to Reedburn as he tried to blackmail her. A tramp jumped out from behind the curtain, killed Reedburn, and then she fled across the garden. Exact same story. The big difference here is that when Valerie speaks about the Oglander family, she talks about them with this air of like bitterness and disgust, framed from her as the fact that they're like lower stock, that they're not like as important as her. This is in massive, stark contrast to the way that the booklet makes it sound like Valerie likes them. Like Valerie is happy to be there. They're treating me well. They're being really nice to me. They're such nice people. And yet this bitterness, obviously in the original story, leads a bit more into the idea that she is estranged from that family, that they don't get on, and that's why she's ran off and is doing her own thing. Then the bit with the shoes comes up, but in the original story, Poirot notices that these shoes, which are patent leather shoes, for some reason the booklet changed them to be high-heeled mules, and I don't really understand why, but Poirot notices that these shoes are clean, and Valerie says, oh yeah, the maids, the servants, just cleaned them and they've brought them up for me. She specifically says, somebody has cleaned my shoes. Poirot and Hastings leave the room, and on the way downstairs, Poirot turns to Hastings and he says, the case is straightforward. There's no need for me to continue to solve this case because it's already solved. There's nothing to investigate. Poirot genuinely believes that there's nothing out of the ordinary. There's no reason to investigate further. The doctor has essentially corroborated Valerie's story, and as has the evidence that he has so far. The fact that Valerie's shoes are clean isn't a problem because she said someone cleaned them. Poirot has seen the family portraits, but there being an extra person in one of the portraits isn't a clue. Like, there could just be somebody who isn't there. Obviously, due to the nature of this being a mystery story, there's a few elements and things that Poirot has seen that seem out of place or don't make sense. But he just dismisses them. Like, we have to remember, we're seeing this story, not this story, the real story, through the perspective of a detective who sees everything. So we're getting to know all of the things that he's seeing that are out of place or make him question something. But there's no reason for him not to believe anyone, so in his eyes, the case is closed. Short story Poirot arrives downstairs and bumps into the daughter, who tells him that the mother of the family would like to speak to him. So while Poirot is waiting, he's waiting in this untidy living room with this bridge game and everything all out from the night before. And Poirot, being the person that he is, starts to tidy up the bridge game while he's waiting. This detail is missing from this booklet, but it answers so many questions. Namely, how did Poirot know that there was a card missing when he couldn't see half the cards on the table? Later on in the story, Poirot reveals that he did find the King of Clubs card, but he found it still inside the box as he was putting the rest of the cards away. It wasn't just stuck out on the table for somebody to see, it was inside the box in a place where nobody would have noticed. It's at this point that Poirot realises, maybe I've dismissed this case too early, maybe there's more to it, because if the family were playing bridge for an hour, as they claim, they would have noticed that the King of Clubs card wasn't in the game. And so this leads him to then start to investigate further. I want to point out that at this point in the story, both Booklet Poirot and Short Story Poirot have the exact same amount of evidence. In fact, Short Story Poirot has more evidence because he's done more investigating. But Booklet Poirot is just like, oh, no, the case is solved. Like, this version of Poirot just takes that limited information, those like random bits of things he's noticed, and ham-fists them together into a vaguely plausible story and is like, well, I'm done, let's fucking go home, I've got EastEnders to watch. I find it really funny that Booklet Poirot's process is exactly the same as frustrated me when I thought I couldn't find the right evidence, so I just threw together the best story I could. So at this point, the real Poirot meets with the mother, and you can see the detective gears in his head have started whirring. He started thinking, how can I look into this further, get more information? And he says to the mother, Valerie said that she saw the family when she was running across the field, so I presume the blinds were open. And the mother says, yeah, the blinds were open, obviously, otherwise she wouldn't have been able to see us. And Poirot says, so how did you not see her when you were sat in the seat facing the window? And the mother says, I must have just been too engrossed in the game. She doesn't correct him. She doesn't say, I wasn't sat there, I was sat on the other seat, my daughter was sat facing the window. So Poirot has now caught the family in a lie. On his way out of the house, Poirot bumps into a servant, and he says to the servant, excuse me, which one of you cleaned Valerie's shoes? And the servant says, none of us did. None of us cleaned the shoes because they didn't need cleaning. So now, Poirot has caught Valerie in a lie. Short Story Poirot now knows that Valerie and the Oglanders are lying to him. They are lying to him and their story doesn't add up. But does he just slap handcuffs on them and call it a day like his Jigsawian counterpart? Or does he do what a real detective does and go and look for more evidence? Guess which one? Guess what he does? He goes back to the house he went to earlier, and he looks for more evidence to try and make sense of why the family might be lying. So at this point, let me revisit the stuff that I skipped earlier when Poirot first came to investigate Reedburn's villa. The library where Reedburn's body was found is described as stretching the length of the building, and there are two windows in this room, one which faces the drive out of the front of the house, and one which faces the garden and the Oglander's house out the back of the house. The curtains at the back of the room that overlooked the Oglander's house were drawn apart, they were open, but the butler insists that he closed them the previous night. So Poirot makes the assumption that Reedburn must have opened the curtains himself, and this is then later corroborated when Valerie tells her story that this tramp was behind the curtains and that Reedburn threw them open to see who was there. The butler tells Poirot that there are two ways in and out of the room. One of them is the main door, which nobody used last night, nobody was seen going in and out. and the other one is a side door that leads out onto the front of the house and can't go around the back. In Valerie's accounts of what happened, she says that the way that she left the room was that she went through the window at the back of the house and then ran across the field. I would like to remind you, none of this, not a shred of this, was in the booklet. Not a single bit of this investigation of this actual crime scene where the body was found was in here. So we've returned now to Poirot revisiting the crime scene after finding out that little bit of extra information from the Oglanders' house. And instead of going to the back window where the body was found, Poirot instead goes to the front window. And when Hastings starts questioning this, Poirot points out that there is evidence of blood on the marble seat by that window, not the one at the back window. And this is where Poirot explains what he thinks may have happened. Poirot's theory is that Reedburn was punched in the face during some kind of altercation, and when he fell backwards, he cracked the back of his head on this chair, which killed him. Poirot says the murder wasn't a murder at all. It was actually an accident. Poirot then uses the fact that Valerie's shoes didn't need cleaning to make the assumption that she may have fainted upon seeing the body, and that whoever had dealt the blow carried her across the field. Whoever had dealt the blow decided that they had to cover up what happened, so what they did was they moved the body of Reedburn from the front window to the back window, and then cleaned up whatever evidence they could of anything having happened to that front window, and they then threw open the curtains. Poirot's justification for this version of the story is that in order for Valerie to have ran to the Oglanders' house, it would have needed to have been the first place that she could see upon being attacked by this supposed tramp. And so they had to position the body and the incident by the back window with the curtains open so that she would then be able to see the house across the field and make a dash for what she thought was the nearest people that could potentially help her. If the incident happened anywhere else in the room, then obviously Valerie would have escaped in a different direction and would not have ended up at the Oglanders' house. In order to explain the holes in the story, a tramp character had to be invented for the curtains to be thrown open and for the blows to be delivered to Reedburn. This theory that Short Story Poirot has come up with explains everything. He now has a story built from the evidence he has that makes sense. But he's not done, because he's a real detective, and Poirot has to be sure. So he does one last thing. He goes back to the Oglanders' house to speak to the mum once again. During this conversation, Poirot gets the mother to admit that the murder was committed by her son, but Poirot says, "I'm not going to report this. The police are happy with the story that they have, and they do not have the eyes of Poirot." And in his eyes, in his view, this was an accident, and it was a family that was trying to cover up this accident to protect their daughter. Even though they were estranged and they hate each other, they were obviously doing it to protect their daughter. The short story ends with Poirot and Hastings walking away and Poirot explaining the last few bits of the story that we haven't had confirmed. And it's during this conversation where Poirot says, "I think that Valerie Sinclair is the estranged daughter of the family." The mother says in the conversation with Poirot that the daughter is dead, but in that sort of way where they both know that Poirot knows. Poirot explains why the game of bridge was a fantastic cover, because bridge has to be played with 4 people, and if you see a bridge game in progress, you naturally assume that it couldn't exist unless 4 people were in the room. And he says, if it weren't for the King of Clubs card having been left in the box, and if it weren't for the mother counteracting the story that the daughter had said, then Poirot may never have solved the case. The last little bit of the story is Poirot saying to Hastings that he would like to pass his compliments onto the psychic, to the clairvoyant, because it is a curious coincidence that her prediction turned out to be true. So, now you can see why I wanted to cover the original story to end this video off, because the original story is great, and I didn't want the reputation of Agatha Christie, beloved author, to be in any way tarnished by the mess that is this. Like, the original story is so good. Poirot investigates the case and there's a few things out of place, but he buys the story he's told. There's no reason to suspect that the story isn't true. But then he sees the King of Clubs card not in the game, and that's when he starts to suspect maybe there's more to this than meets the eye. And so he catches the mother and the daughter in the lie, he catches Valerie in the lie, and he goes back to the house with a new theory and with new clues and ideas, and he finds the blood and he formulates a hypothesis of what happened, of who committed the crime. And for his own like sense of completion for like he's not going to report the crime. He just wants to know that his theory is correct. So he goes back to the house and he gets the information out of the mother to basically plug that case in his own mind. He needs to know the answer, so he goes and finds out. It's a perfectly written short story, but the booklet absolutely butchers it. It completely ruins the story by condensing it down in such a way where it misses out crucial information. Like taking the story away from Poirot at the start and into the scenario of the night before where the Oglanders are interrupted by Valerie is really deceptive. And it's really cheap of the booklet to do this, to try and trick you into thinking that they're not involved, that they weren't there for the scene, for the crime, basically. And then obviously the fact that Poirot doesn't do any investigation at all into the crime scene in this. He just turns up at the house like talking to people and then starts making assumptions and solves the case based on just people telling him things. Like that as well is really shit. It makes Poirot just seem super reckless and rash. He just makes these assumptions based on nothing. It's like, well, it's done. Case is done. Pay up. Give me the money. It's like Poirot in the booklet, he does half of the investigation. He does half the work of actual Poirot, but he comes to the exact same conclusion. Like in the original story, the clues that booklet Poirot uses are just used as stepping stones for the real Poirot to essentially solve the case. Like he uses them as things that make the story seem implausible to then, thanks Fly, to make the story, the clues he finds are like, they make the story seem less. Look, I'm going to level with you. I've been recording now for potentially 3 hours. I'm really, really warm. My mouth is getting really dry and I'm starting to mess up everything I say. I'm so done. I am so done with this Jigsaw and covering this fucking topic. I'm done with it. Honestly, you know what? Go fuck yourself. Where's my conclusion? In my notes, I've got some stuff written down for what I wanted to say in the conclusion, but you know what? I'm just going to go a cappella. I can't be fucked. I am honestly, genuinely, I'm so fed up. Like, I think if I didn't cut it out earlier, this is the 3rd time I've recorded this. Because the first time I recorded it, I wasn't happy. It was all improvised. I had no notes. I hadn't even looked at the original story. I was just talking about how much it annoyed me. And it just didn't feel like a good enough bit of content to put out, if that makes sense. And then the second time I filmed it, I had too many notes and I just wasn't enjoying the process of recording. So this fucking Jigsaw has managed to take up more of my life than it should have done. And honestly, I'm done. The whole point of this is for me to get it out there and to release it, and then for me to be to I don't know, sweat out the anger. And so I'm going to get to that point now where I think I'm going to just you can tell. You can just tell that I've been recording for a while and I'm really struggling to finish sentences properly. Suffice to say, yeah, the Jigsaw has been pissing me off now for the year. And the reason I still have it is because, well, I mean, for one, I wanted to make a video on it. But also, I don't know what to do with it. Because I don't want to take it back to the charity shop. Because then I'm giving somebody else the torture of going through it. I would be subjecting another human being to misery and frustration and anger. And I'm not about that. I get it. I'm exaggerating a little bit. It's fine. It's a Jigsaw. Honestly, I've been looking for that Jigsaw again every time I've been into a charity shop because I was going to buy them so that other people wouldn't do them. That's how adamant I am that I hate this thing. I want to burn it. I actually want to burn it because I think it'll be a nice little ribbon tie, nice little bow on this story to just get rid of it and not have to worry about it again. Is that too much? Am I taking it too far? Maybe. Oh God, let's have a look at my conclusion. Is there anything worth saying? Yeah, I was just trying to get away from my work and just chill, and got angry. And oh, that's a fair point. Well done, Past Brad. The fact that I was actually enjoying it up until the reveal, and the fact that I couldn't figure out like what it was supposed to be, and then when I look back at it now, I'm like, you're such a chump. You're such a loser for enjoying something that turned out to be shit. I tarnished the experience. It's put me off ever doing mystery jigsaws again. It really has. I'm not doing another one. I don't know, like, maybe, you know what? If this video gets 5,000 likes, I'll find another Agatha Christie jigsaw and do that one, and maybe that one will be better. Maybe it'll have actual clues in it, rather than just being a nonsense picture that misleads me and takes me away from the answer. My original conclusion was quite funny. Like, there's a bit in here where I was supposed to be, acting out the instruction that was given to the creator of the image by the person who made the jigsaw. And it got really weird and convoluted and started talking about how people's parents used to beat them with jigsaws. But I'm not doing it now. This jigsaw is the reason that you don't get to hear that funny conclusion. So I was saying I wanted everybody to hate the jigsaw as much as I do. Hate it even more now, because that jigsaw has taken away the funny conclusion that you could have got. So, fuck you, jigsaw. Go to hell. Burn. I want to burn it. That's how you destroy cursed objects, isn't it? Every break, Brad, so far is going to be ending with a little bit where I just chat to camera, which is basically what my conclusion just was. I just talk to the camera, but the difference with this one is that I'm not doing any zooms and I'm not putting a filter on it. It's just the footage that comes out of the camera. So this is raw, Brad. You get me raw. Yeah, so this is the third break, Brad, that I've now released on the new channel. And obviously it's different to the other two. The other two are movie reviews, in-depth movie reviews. And I decided that I needed a break from the Scorpion King because the Scorpion King 2 really took it out of me. It looks like it's going to be a pattern. These videos are going to take something out of me and then I get it back afterwards. So yeah, I actually haven't watched the Scorpion King 3 yet. I haven't got round to it because I wanted to get this Jigsaw one out of the way. But you know what, maybe I'll watch it today. Maybe if I've got some time. What time are we on? I might not have time now. Maybe I'll watch it tomorrow. I think I might watch it and start working on that because that's going to be the next video. In the previous iteration of this series, so when it existed on the previous channel it was on, there was a video series on that was called Bite-Size Bullshittery. And that was based, it was like a top 5 things that have annoyed me this month, and I would go through these individual things. I'm trying to decide whether to bring that series back here as the long form videos as they were. I can't even speak properly anymore. As the long form videos that they were, or to turn them into shorts. Because shorts are obviously very big now, and I think it would be nice for this channel to have a shorts presence. So the little annoyances that I'd stretched out into a full video, I could probably do as a shorts version. And that would then give the channel a shorts presence and maybe bring some more people in. I don't know. I think the first time I recorded this, when I recorded the version last year, I think I asked people, leave a comment if you've had a similar frustration with a puzzle or jigsaw. Because it'll be interesting. I want to hear other people's things. And I do, at some point, it would be nice if I got enough comments to do comments versions. I always find myself at the end of these just rambling because it's nice to just have the leash taken off. But I think I'm going to draw this to a close. So if you watch this far, massive appreciation from me. If you want to get in touch with me regarding anything, obviously you can comment below. I'm still using X. I'm still using that platform, even though it seems pretty fucking dead at the moment. And you can also get me on Instagram. And at some point, I'll use my TikTok. Those are all in the descriptions of these videos. So if you want to follow any of those, that's where to do it. You can hear the tiredness in my voice. I just devolved as this video goes on. If this had been another hour, you'd just be watching just a puddle. Just a puddle of Brad like this. Just, the jigsaw made me sad. You know what? Let's end this on a positive note. I never have to do that jigsaw again. Unless I get that. Unless this video gets me 1,000 subscribers. Let's end on a positive note. Everybody, go and live your best life. Because life is short, and sometimes you find yourself wasting it doing nonsense. I'm done. Brad, stop recording. Just cut it off here. That was really therapeutic.